It's about how well you can listen to and respond to what is being offered to you. So there's that give and take and that interplay between that. And it is also kind of about the rhythm and the timbre, particularly when it comes to hypnosis. Those sort of musical elements are so important. How you emphasize certain words, it's very important how you emphasize certain notes in music. And the patience that says, I really want to do this, but it's going to take some time.
Patience. Imagine what life would be like if we had a little more patience and slowed down a bit. Now imagine how it would feel if your brain took a break too. Breathe that in for a moment. When I think about how my life has changed since I started working in the field of holistic health and emotional well-being, I have to say my patience, my listening, and how I use my words has definitely improved. Life experiences are a big part of that. The lessons that you and I learn pave the way for some really cool shifts if we just pay attention and, well, tune in. That's something Doug O'Brien knows about. Being in tune, so to speak. Both as a musician and an internationally recognized hypnotherapist, Nlp and Havening techniques practitioner. But how did a guy who was playing Carnegie Hall and the New York City clubs back in the day find his way into the field of mental health, sharing a different stage with some heavy hitters in health and well-being like Dr. Oz and Tony Robbins? I got to admit, I was curious myself, and I've known the guy a while. So on this episode of Holistically Speaking, Doug shares his story on how music and mental health are really one and the same. You'll learn more about how the power of persuasion can truly have an impact on your life and those around you, why the words you choose matter, but how you say them may matter more, and why it might be time to slow your roll a bit and find a healthier beat, holistically speaking. Doug O'Brien, it is such a pleasure to have you in this space on Holistically Speaking. Well, you've held space for me on your podcast, so I obviously want to return the favor. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So just to let listeners know, Doug and I go back to the days of when I was first looking into different modalities to add to my coaching business, my practitioner business, and Havening kind of fell in my lap. I always like to say that things are falling into, they happen because we allow them to just manifest. And when Havening came into my life and I met you, I really gravitated to how you held space for those who were learning this approach. And I've shared many evenings with you and the group in New York City when you were holding the meetings there. And I just learned so much from you, not just in Havening, but also in hypnotherapy and NLP. If people are not aware of what Neuro-Linguistic Programming is, we'll talk about that as well. But I think the big question that I want to put out there first is how a guy who was a musician by trade got into this work and transformed from going from one area to another. And let's just start with your backstory a little bit.
My backstory. Well, it happened overnight. I woke up one day and said, I'm done with music. I'm going to do this now. And it was just like that. No, not at all. It was a long, long process. I moved to New York City in 1980 to play in rock bands. And so I did, and did that. That's not where I made my money, just by the way. We were playing original music in the Lower East Side, punk rock and other things like that. We played some big venues like CBGB's and Studio 54 and things like that. But money was not part of the equation for the most part. Most of the money went out for rehearsal time and for getting us to the gigs, etc. So I made the money by teaching music and playing in bars and playing parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs and churches and things like that. So it was fun. It was fun. And, but it was hard. It was a hard life being a musician like that. It's very, very difficult, but maybe perhaps, especially in the New York City of the 1980s, it was a tough slog. But, somewhere around that time, 1985, I took a fire walk by Anthony Robbins, not because I wanted to, actually, because my girlfriend dragged me to it. girlfriend at the time. But I was grateful to her because it was very cool. And I learned NLP from Tony Robbins at that time. And I was so impressed and so enamored of neuro-linguistic programming that I wanted to learn more. So I went off and studied with Tony and got a certification in NLP, certification as a practitioner of NLP. Met at that practitioner a bunch of different people like Robert Dilts, who was one of the co-developers of NLP, and Richard Bandler was the creator of NLP. I thought, well, gosh, they're very different from Tony, but they're still doing this stuff, perhaps even better in some regards. Let me study with them too. So I went off and did a master practitioner with Robert Dilts and trainer's training with Richard Bandler and various other people along the way. And as I just was doing this for a hobby kind of thing, it was improving my life, getting me over some dark times and some things that I needed just for me. I had no intention of switching professions, but sometimes people would see the difference and say, gosh, what's happening with you? And can you help me? And so I'd say, well, sure. And if it was a friend, I would just do sessions with them and we'd do some hypnosis, we'd do some NLP, whatever. And they'd benefit from it. And then they'd say, could you help my friend? How much do you charge? And I'm like, $50? They go like, really? That's all? I said, I'm at $150? I said, really? That's all? So, I'd started doing it and I discovered that it paid well and music didn't always. And it was a lot easier to sit and talk with somebody than it was to, have to do all these rehearsals to get a band together, et cetera. So I sort of segued, if you will, into doing this as a full-time gig by somewhere around 1990.
Were you that guy that people always felt comfortable talking to and opening up to? I mean, there's always that person in the circle of friends that's like the therapist of the friends.
I was a good listener.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. You are a good listener. And it's interesting because we have these life-changing events sometimes, or we realize there's more, or there's something we want to do, or something that we want to incorporate. I remember just in my own journey, starting as a journalist, and like, I know there's more, and I want to do more. And I thought about going back to school for, therapy, or what am I not doing right? Like, what's not clicking with me? And yet being that person that people always listen to, right? So it kind of like you're taking these pieces of what you have created in your life and adding these additional skills that you've learned in life, like the NLP, the hypnosis, and you're not forgetting about the music. It's part of probably what you do now, being so public and open and so easy to talk to, So it's like you're blending your passions and your purpose together to create the profession, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways it's interesting because when I was, deeper into hypnosis, I would make recordings of the background music that I would use in the hypnosis recording. So I'd, combining the composing with the playing of the instrumentation behind it. And it was a lot of fun to do that. And I liked doing it because I didn't like a lot of the music that was out there as options. I think the music shouldn't call attention to itself, but it should be there as a kind of hypnotic background, but not calling attention to itself in the process. So I was able to do that. And in fact, interestingly, now that I'm, COVID times, we've retreated to the country house, cottage, cabin, shack, this little place.
As long as it has a roof, you're okay.
Yes, roof, walls, running water, and internet. We have a piano up here. And I've spent a lot more time just playing than I have for years. And it's fun to be able to say, wow, I'm actually pretty good at this thing. I can play this instrument. It's
never letting go of your first love, which is music, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about NLP, but we're not really explaining what neuro-linguistic programming is. And I do want to share that with folks that might not be familiar with it, because there are so many beautiful techniques out there that we can implement into our lives, whether you become a coach like we are, a practitioner like we are, or you just want little everyday skills that can help you move forward in life and have powerful conversations and be empowered. So do you want to elaborate on what NLP is?
Sure. Neuro-linguistic programming is named for the idea that your brain is like a computer. So neuro-linguistic programming has to say, if we want to program the computer, then we have to understand the computer language of this particular computer. Because why? Every computer is different, right? So Macintosh is different from a PC, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to understand the particular computer language before you can program that particular computer. So our neurological computer, this thing between our ears, is got its own unique operating system. But it didn't come with an owner's manual, so we have to figure out what that is as we go. So Neuro-Linguistic Programming is an attempt to do that. It's subtitled the study of the structure of subjective experience. So I think that's kind of in a nutshell what NLP is all about. But then there are applications for that understanding of what the study of the structure of subjective experience brings us. So how can you say, wow, your subjective experience is a phobia? You see a cat and you freak out? That's amazing. How do you do that? We find out what the structure of that is, because maybe we want to do that too. Chances are slim, but maybe we do. So we find out the structure, because the idea is that you can model somebody who's doing something excellently and bring in that model to your own computer and begin to get those same results from yourself that they are getting from you, because basically we all have the same computer. So we just have to run different programs. Or you can perturb that system and say, well, you're doing that to feel this result and you don't want that? Well, let's try something different. And so you help a person who's got that cat phobia to not have a cat phobia anymore. And that works really well for that as well.
You talk about the NLP programming in such a good way for people to understand, because a lot of times we hear sleight of mouth is a big term in NLP, and it actually is the title of your book, The User's Guide. Yeah. And I want to talk about that too. But the difference is that some people see using words to persuade as manipulation. Mm-hmm. And manipulating, it can be a negative word. Some people see it as a negative word, but we can actually use it as an empowering word, a word that can actually help us and help those that we're communicating with, right?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So there are principles of the NLP or sleight of mouth that actually can help you in persuasion. And can it also be self-persuasion as well, correct? Like how we talk about ourselves. Yeah, how we talk about ourselves or to ourselves.
Absolutely. No, I've often said to people, when I used to travel the country and do hypnosis workshops for smoking cessation and weight loss. And I would often tell people, it's like, fortunately, you ladies and gentlemen, you are here tonight with one of the greatest hypnotists of all time. And they'd sort of laugh and think I'm talking about me.
You're talking about yourself?
Yeah. And that person is sitting in that chair that you're sitting in right behind your belly button. Yes, in fact, yes, you are you. Because I'm leaving town tomorrow, and whatever we've done here tonight was effective. But you're staying here with yourself. And the way you talk to yourself is vastly more important than anything else.
Absolutely. I love that you say that, because when people come to us for help, as coaches, as practitioners, there are people that feel that, help me fix this, do this. I'm suffering from this. It's like there's a magic pill, and I'm always that first person to say, yeah, I'm going to put the tools in your hands. I'm kind of here to guide you. I can help you when maybe mirror back at some things that you're not seeing yourself at this point in time. But really, isn't the empowerment coming from giving them the tools to help themselves in the healing process? I don't want the role of healer, except if I'm healing me. Right. And that, I think that's such a beautiful gift that we can give people, and have that gift as a guide by your side, and the hypnosis as well. Look, let's go back to the days of old school hypnosis, where people hear that term and they're like, you're getting very sleepy. And there's the stage hypnosis, it's not really like that. And I think I'd love for you to share more about that as well.
Okay, sure, yes.
Yeah.
Well, part of the reason I learned hypnosis is because I was enamored by NLP, and the more I studied NLP, people were saying, wow, that guy, and they'd be pointing to, Tad James or Tony Robbins or someone, that guy is so good at NLP, he can even do Ericksonian hypnosis. I'm going like, well, what's that? What's that? I said, oh, that's where NLP all came from, basically. I said, you need to tell me more about this. So I found out what they meant, and that is that in the early days, we're talking about NLP modeling. Bandler and Grinder, the two creators of NLP, modeled some great therapists. They modeled Virginia Satir of family therapy. They modeled Fritz Perls of Gestalt therapy. And then they modeled Milton Erickson.
Right, yeah.
And he was like so amazing and deep and rich and stuff. basically stopped modeling people after that because they just said, we've hit the mother load of stuff.
The buck stops here.
Yeah. So much of what we think of as NLP is really kind of codified Ericksonian hypnosis. Erickson was not one of those old school hypnotists. You're getting sleepy, watch the watch as you watch yourself disappear. He wasn't doing that. He was meeting with people and telling stories. And he was meeting with people and recognizing this person's already in a trance. It's not an effort to get them into one. It's how do we direct the trance that they're in to have them be more productive and happier in life? How do we direct the trance that they're in? So very different approach to hypnosis, and one that really is client-centered. So it's not me fixing you or me hypnotizing you. It's like I'm entering into your trance with you, and we're going to be a guide to help you get to where you want to go. And, indirect suggestions comes from that, et cetera. And so again, sometimes people look at that and they say, okay, what's the manipulations thing that he did? What's the indirect stuff? How do they hypnotize people without knowing that they're being hypnotized? I want to get into that. It's kind of the dark side of this stuff. Because in a way he did do that, but he was such a, wonderful person that he was doing it always for the betterment of the person he was working with.
And aren't we kind of in a hypnotic state so many times during the day? I mean, I think about how many times you might miss an exit when you're driving. You're in a hypnotic state, Yes. People ask me that all the time, like, because, I'm studying hypnosis myself and integrating it into my work as a havening practitioner. Yeah. And I love that. And you've been a big part of me wanting to go into that journey. So let me just say publicly, thank you. And, I learned so much more about that. We're already using hypnosis every day and we don't even realize it, and we're in that hypnotic state anytime we're kind of, like I mentioned about you're driving along, your thoughts are where they are. You're like, oh, wait, there goes my exit, right? And it's not the whole you're getting sleepy stage hypnosis that we are so used to hearing and seeing in the movies and TV. And I love Milton's approach, the Ericksonian approach as well. But, the more we are open to being able to self-hypnotize and be aware of it, and really the first step is awareness in anything, isn't it?
I would say so. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I'd love to talk about what you're doing now, especially, you said that you're living upstate now. You were in New York for a really long time. That's how you and I have gotten to know each other. And what has the move been like for you, moving not only your practice, but just your life in general outside the hubbub of New York City, where you were like smack dab in it, especially your office?
Yeah, the office was on 29th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. I'm sorry, that's wrong. 6th and 7th Avenues.
See how easy we would forget? When you're like, it's nice up here in my shack.
I'm very fortunate. I'm very happy here. I miss my office. It was a great place. But, I couldn't just, beam over there, to use a Star Trek term. I couldn't just materialize it. I had to travel from my apartment in Brooklyn on the subways and, put up with people and stuff.
Darn people.
I know. There are so many of them. But I had to do all that every day to get to the office. It was a great place once you got there. But, and I spent a lot of time, making nice. I soundproofed it and did got a stand-up desk, and I got this microphone, and I did all sorts of things in order to basically do what I'm doing right now, which was I was going to do podcasting and teach online, teach classes online, et cetera, from that office. So, it was funny because I was planning on doing this, kind of moving towards rolling it out somewhere, maybe April of 2020. But suddenly it was like, what? I have to move. It's like COVID stomped on the gas pedal of my life and just, and I found myself up here in March and started doing a sleight of mouth class the following month from basically my attic on a laptop with just no good microphone at all, just using I had a good laptop, but still just using the laptop to do this thing that I've been planning and invested some money in creating. I was just doing from my attic on a laptop. So it's shown me what's possible. And I'm basically doing exactly that now. I'm teaching classes 3 days a week in sleight of mouth, hypnosis, and NLP I moved out of the attic. So I've,
So,
since we closed the office in Manhattan, that stand-up desk is now here in our living room. So
lovely. I'm sure the wife loves that.
We're using it right now. Actually,
Okay.
I'm in what should be our bedroom, except that it's in the process of being painted. So there's no bed in the bedroom at the moment. There's this desk and the microphone.
You're just sleeping on the standing desk.
Yeah, sleeping on the fold-out couch.
Oh boy. But it's all, would you say that you're enjoying life now, knowing that remembering yourself being in it, when we don't really see it until we're out of it. And we're talking right now about the great resignation. That's the big terminology with this pandemic, how people are leaving the city and they're like, wait a minute, why am I spending 2 hours of my day traveling to get to my little cubicle with no windows looking at any light when there's life out there and I can do everything I need to do with Wi-Fi and a microphone if you want to use it and a camera. And so much of what we do, which is so beautiful about the work we do, is that we are able to do it virtually. And if we want to meet in person, we have that ability as well. But we don't realize it till we're out of it, right?
So true. So true. When we've had this house, my wife and I, since 2007. So we'd come up here on weekends and always going like, wouldn't it be great if we could stay more here, to spend more time up here?
Guess who manifested that?
My office in Manhattan, as you say, was a great office. I had no windows in that office. I mean, it was, blank. And right now, as we sit here, I'm sitting in the bedroom / office, but I'm looking out at a bird feeder. There's a downy woodpecker at the suet thing, and there's I see the Esopus Creek and the mountains out there. It's pretty amazing just to be in this.
It's a little better of a view. It was a great office. You did have a good office. I used to love coming there and doing our meetups and, just and maybe it wasn't so much about the space, but the people in the space. I'm going to say that. You can create that space anywhere. But now you have, the woodpeckers outside. You're sleeping on your couch, and there's a lot of benefits.
Thank God for Zoom. Can you imagine if this pandemic had hit like in 1985 or something? And
I say that all the time. I always say that. I'm like, what would we have done? We'd be reading a lot of books, and there would be a lot of need for mental health help. I don't even know how people.
There still is, but most people can get it online. It's an amazing thing.
And we have this ability, living in a global village, that we can cross boundaries and cross borders. Having clients across the pond, overseas. It's not just in your zip code like it used to be. Now we're able to reach people that really need help and need assistance or guidance from wherever we are, in our living rooms, in our kitchen, and doing this kind of stuff, doing the podcasting, which you have as well. You have the essential coaching skills, which, let me just mention that real quick. Thank you so much for having me on your show last year. I really enjoyed our conversation, as I always enjoy our conversations. But essential coaching skills, Doug O'Brien, really great guests and great conversations. I have to say.
You're the great guest. I mean, they haven't been as good ever since you were on.
Oh, stop it.
We do the best we can.
He's using that sleight of mouth stuff right now. Is that persuasion you're using?
If you feel persuaded, then yes, it is.
I'm persuaded. I'm persuaded to do even more talking and listening to you talk about how awesome I am. That's fine. So how did you find havening?
Well, I was teaching NLP and hypnosis, and one of my students was knowledgeable about havening. I said, "You've got to check this out." And I said, "Check what out?"
Exactly, the same way.
This psychosensory. And I said, pardon me? It's like tapping. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I've tried that. It didn't work for me. And it works for a lot of people. I'm saying it's fine. But it didn't work for me. And so I wasn't that interested, but I was persuaded to go. And I went to a demo of havening and saw this remarkable transformation take place and thought, holy crap, this stuff works. This is something I need to pay more attention to. So I did a certification weekend and haven't looked back. It's just a remarkable, remarkable tool.
Yeah, agreed. And your story sounds so similar to mine, because I remember you being there when I was in the 2-day workshop. And I was one of the people that Dr. Rudin brought on stage. And
like I
volunteered. And I remember walking around after, people saying, "Oh, you're walking taller. You feel," I mean, I
Mhm.
was lighter. I had like a couple of folks coming up to me being like, "You're going to feel a little different." And I did. And that was for me, same thing. I'm like, I need this. I need this to share with others. I need this for
Yeah.
me in my own healing and growing, but I need to put it out there because it is so beautiful. And like you said, people always ask that question, oh, is it like tapping? Similar to in that it is a psychosensory approach, different in that I think there's it's a level up. And yes, tapping can work and you can use both at the same time even, but there's something really powerful that the Dr. Rudin's, I want to say Rudin squared, but that would be bad math.
It would be.
That's
Yeah.
not even correct math, but it's so much easier just to say the Dr. Rudins. It sounds like a band.
Yes.
Doesn't it sound like a
I think
band?
appropriately would be the doctor's Rudin.
The doctor's Rudin.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound like a band?
It does. I think there was one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Doctor's Rudin. And opening tonight is Doug O'Brien. Actually, the star act is Doug O'Brien, and the Doctor's Rudin is opening for them.
Right. Right.
I love it.
Please, come on.
So what's going on next in your life? Like what's happening now? You know, you mentioned that you have your Sleight of Mouth group, and you've been working on this book, The Storyteller's Handbook.
Yeah, storytelling is something that's near and dear to my heart. I've been doing it for years. I used to teach a class in it with a colleague from England named Nick Kemp. We used to teach a class called Stories from the Outside In, which was just a cute little title. But we actually created a fictional place called the Outside In, spelled INN. It was just the English country lodge. And we had a website for a while where people could go to it and hear stories. And we started off by thinking just, with Ericksonian stories, therapeutic stories, they could tell in under 5 minutes. And each one was timed for 5 minutes. And then we get it down to 2 minutes. Then we started teaching a class in it because people wanted to figure that out and know how to do that better. And it was just fun. It was one of the funnest classes we taught. So I've decided I wanted to make it into a book form. And that's basically what I've worked on for a number of years and is, ready to go. I just need to find somebody who's willing to publish this very highly illustrated full color book. And I guess that's expensive because people have been saying no a lot. So anyway.
There are a lot of people that are doing the book writing right now. I think this pandemic has definitely opened minds and space. Those 2 hours you might be traveling, going from, on the queue into the city or whatever, are now spent at a computer really in our thoughts. We're in our thoughts so much. I've been in the process of doing the same thing in the book writing, but creating that content is therapy for ourselves too. Yeah. Love that. If you are just tuning in, and if you are starting at the 25-minute point, hey, that's cool. That's such a radio thing to say if you're just tuning in. But I just want to mention again, we're talking with Doug O'Brien here on Holistically Speaking. He is a coach, a havening techniques practitioner, a hypnotherapist, also NLP practitioner, has the podcast, The Essential Coaching Skills, which I actually had a chance to be on episode 22. Give it a listen, but listen to all of his episodes, really empowering guests, interesting conversations. And, I also just want to mention thank you to my friends at Squadcast who hold the space for this to happen, this conversation to happen. So what would you say is the most powerful takeaway that you've learned doing this type of work? Coming from that musical background, being that guy that was playing in the real cool places in New York City back in the 80s, but finding this transformation, what's the best takeaway?
Well, it's interesting that you draw that parallel because, I was a rock musician, but I also was a classically trained pianist. So the first concert I ever did in New York City was at Carnegie Hall. 1980, I played new composers. I wasn't the composer. I was performing a set of piano etudes written by the composer Donald Bolden, and he had asked me to be the person to deliver its premiere in New York City at this composers festival, new music festival. So that was the first concert I did, and then I moved to New York City later that year, same year, and by December I was playing at CBGB's in a punk rock band called Ultraviolence. So it's quite a turnaround.
Of course you were.
Yeah. Well, you can see that, right? Ultraviolence, but it's kind of my MO. kind of the way I roll, you know.
It's a good
But
color.
but yeah, it's interesting because the lessons that I learned from learning music and the lessons that I learned from playing music is very applicable. You know, it's not just about, you know, what you do, it's about listening. You know, it's about listening to the other person that you're having a conversation with. Jazz, rock and roll, you know, there's a lot of conversations happening musically there. And so it's not just about how you're putting out and how good you are putting out this riff or whatever. It's about how well you can listen to and respond to what is being offered to you. So there's that give and take and that interplay between that. And it is also kind of about the rhythm and the timbre, particularly when it comes to hypnosis. Those sort of musical elements are so important. You know, how you emphasize certain words, you know, it's very important how you emphasize certain notes in music. And the patience that says, you know, I really want to do this, but it's going to take some time. Here's a story for you. I was back in the day when I was a music major, I was very influenced by a fellow named Chick Corea. I loved the way his jazz playing was very, very new and different. And I bought an instrument just like his, a Fender Rhodes piano, and I was trying to learn some of his stuff. But this was 1970s sometime, and late 70s, and there was no music for it. You had to listen to it and get it off the record player. So you'd keep having to put the needle back and listen to it again and try to play it. It was hard. And I never quite got it. And being that I was trying and never quite getting it, I learned it wrong, basically. And I never got it right until this year. Because this year, because of the internet, et cetera, and because I'm up here isolated at the house where I have a piano and a little bit of time, I was able to find somebody who had written a transcription of that piece, like a classical piece of music. He'd taken the jazz and like put it into basically, you know, classical music notation. And I was able to really figure it out. But to do that, I had to slow it down. You know, I had to say, okay, this goes one. It's supposed to go like this. The piece is supposed to be about this speed, like 1, 2, 3, 4, about that fast. But I had to slow it down to be about 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4, and just go note by note by note through this piece until I could get it right at that speed, and then take the metronome and put up at like 1 notch. And so you wouldn't notice a difference, but it is a little bit faster.
Even
you just
that,
keep doing that.
even what you were saying right there, like when you were doing it the slow beat, it resonated in my body differently. When you were doing this, and then you went da, 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 like my whole body changed, how I felt it in my body, and it just shows the power of music.
Yeah.
It really, really does. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I teach in my hypnosis classes. It's not so much what it is that you're saying, it's how you're saying it.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick, because I am a firm believer, and I talk about this all the time, the power of words. The words we use, even in the sentence structure matters. And I remember learning a lot from Sarah Payton, you know, with Your Resonant Self, where she talks about empathy and resonance and how we use words in nonviolent communication. And when we were talking on the podcast a while back, the way she shared how we can be compassionate towards ourselves and the language that we use with ourselves, and how that we can, you know, broadcast that out in ways that we share with others does make a difference. And sometimes people are like, no, it's not the words, but it is. It really is the words. And I'd love to elaborate on that a little bit about why words are so important.
Well, if you think about it, when you go back far enough, words were magic, weren't they? And, you know, even in the Bible, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, or whatever. You know, it goes back to words. Enchantments, you know, magic spells were all word-based. You know, so what you say is highly important. But it's also interesting that the way you say it seems to be even more important. There's a study that was done a number of years ago that's often taken out of context and misused, but nevertheless it is instructive, that only in a given communication, the way you hear what's being communicated is only 7% the word choices themselves. And a much higher percentage is the way that it's said, the tonality, the emphasis that it's being said. And even a larger percentage than that is the body language, the physiology. So like if you said to somebody, if you read a Hallmark card to somebody and you said something like, I am so happy that your mother is going to come stay with us. If you read those words on a Hallmark, I'd be like, oh, that's so sweet. But if when said spouse was looking at you saying that, was going like, I am so happy your mother's coming to stay with us, and, shaking his head and scowling and say it with that tone of voice, it clearly means something other than what the words are saying.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's why we lose so much in context when we text. I mean,
Text,
oh my God, text can ruin relationships. I'm pretty sure text has ruined some of mine, because there's no context. And you look at the words, you're like, what do you mean by that? Right?
Can you believe she did that?
Right. It's like, I mean that I'm really excited that your mother is coming to stay with us. I don't understand why that's not coming across that way. Right? Then it goes back to like maybe something that triggered that response too, right?
Right. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It's so true. I mean, thinking about how we say things and the tone we use, the body language we use, and the words together, it's such a dance.
It is.
It really is a dance. Yeah.
It is a dance. Absolutely.
Are you planning on using more music, as you said, within some of the work you're doing? You're going to incorporate it more?
That's a great question. Zoom is not great for music, unfortunately. I would try it at first.
Well, there goes my Zoom sponsorship. And yours.
And mine. Yeah, well, they didn't offer a sponsorship, so I'm not hurting too bad. But yeah, it's not a great medium for that, technical difficulties or whatever. But at any rate, I tried at the beginning of COVID when I was holding my classes originally. I said, hey, let me play this for you. And I'd play, but it just didn't come across. And then when you get people trying to sing together, forget about it. It ain't going to happen. So, no, not planning
at least not on that platform.
On that platform, yeah.
Because I mean, music, I love to incorporate music when I do like group sessions and anything on. I try to put music in the background. I try to do like a sample because you're right. It gets distorted, you get a bunch of people singing happy birthday and it's like, wait, what just happened? But there is something really powerful. I mean, when you can go on YouTube and hear all the different meditations and there's like the different beats that are behind it, the megahertz, different kinds of beats make a different, does something differently to your body. But even just songs, like right before you and I were chatting, I was listening to, Colin Hay. I love Colin Hay from Men at Work. And, he went all acoustic and he's out there on his own for years. And I've seen him a number of times in concert. And there's that one song, Waiting for My Real Life to Begin, that I was bawling right before this. Have you heard that song?
No, I don't know that song.
But it's like, it's the music together. It's him playing the guitar. It's his raspy voice in with the lyrics. And it's really about an inner guidance. That song to me is about inner guidance. And I'm just listening to it and I was reading the lyrics again, but it just reminds me how powerful words are and how they are shared. You got to listen to the song, folks. Okay. Those listening, it's a beautiful song.
Write it down. Colin Hay.
Waiting for My Real Life to Begin. Shout out to Colin Hay for bringing that song into our lives. It's so beautiful. It's funny to watch how some musicians go from being in like the rock bands and the different bands that they're in to going out on their own and their music completely just changes in the most beautiful way, Yeah. I felt that about Sting. Things like that too.
No, it's true. When you're with the band and you're trying to do a certain thing, like perhaps for an arena or whatever, then you write certain types of songs for the audience that they expect. But when you don't have that pressure, when you're playing in a nightclub or whatever, a small room, and it's just you and the acoustic. Yeah,
right. You've got yourself to just make choices. It's different. Yeah, going to the places in New York, like the smaller venues, were always my favorite. Over like the Madison Square Gardens.
David Byrne wrote a book about how music works. That's the title of the book. And he talks about that. He talks about how, the room, the environment influences the musical choices. He says, like back in the Middle Ages or whatever, when they were doing Gregorian chants, part of the reason they did that is because they were in this really echoey, cathedral or vespers or whatever they were, where one person would sing, there would be like whoa, 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 like this 2-minute echo from it. So they had to keep it real simple and real pure. But then when they got to other venues, outdoor venues or whatever, then they could get drums in there and do various other things. So a band playing at CBGB's is going to sound really different if they're up there just with an acoustic guitar. It's not going to work.
No.
So you've got to have the band. So it's very interesting that the environment seems to influence the space, influence the musical choices.
Speaking of books, going back to what you were just saying about David Byrne, who actually, I think, if I recall back in the day, and I don't know how far back this was, I remember seeing him on the cover of maybe it was Time magazine or one of the magazines, and he was considered like one of the smartest men in the world. Like he said,
oh, really?
Yeah, which makes sense. Yeah. He's brilliant. Do you read a lot?
I do.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite books you want to share with listeners?
Besides How Music Works by David Byrne.
Exactly. Well, that's what made me think about it. Is that really one of your favorites?
Well, it's the one I've been reading most recently.
Yeah.
Let me see. Most of the books that I read, I have to admit, are nonfiction about stuff like NLP and hypnosis, et cetera.
Yeah.
I've been reading about spiral dynamics recently, which is kind of interesting. I think the author's name is Beck, but I'm not positive of that.
Okay.
But that's kind of interesting. I've been trying to get hold of either the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or this Claire Graves thing that's elucidated in spiral dynamics. One of these sort of personality profiling things. And they're all really interesting. And I've read them and I've tried to do them, but none of them is really stuck for me somehow. I know people that go oh, he's a 6 in the Enneagram, or oh, he's a internal whatever through the Myers-Briggs
INJP,
right.
LMNOP. I remember that from college.
Yeah. Right. But I could never quite, just grok it. So, so I keep looking, but I'm enjoying the spiral dynamics one right now. It might be
that and the David Byrne book. Maybe we'll throw those in on the podcast page to let people know about it. And learning how to firewalk. I can't believe when you started out this, I was like, oh, he did the firewalk.
I did the firewalk. I put on firewalks.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Wow. How was that? Doing it and supporting people.
At first I did it, for myself, just as a participant, but then I became the center manager for Tony's base of operations in New York City. So I organized. Tony did the firewalks, but I organized them for him back in the 80s in New York City. And then somebody asked me to come to Pittsburgh and do one. So I actually did a couple there in Pittsburgh, a couple of firewalks. So I was being Tony, basically.
So was it harder doing the firewalk? Was it more difficult to do the firewalk, or was it more difficult to support others? And maybe that goes back to trusting yourself with yourself and others.
Definitely more difficult to support others. Because the firewalk itself is very personal, very quick. Honestly, you start walking and then you're done. It's like you walk 15 steps, 15 feet. It's a 15-foot long thing. You're across it in four or 5 steps. You're just, depending if you're really excited, it might be 3 steps. Done. So it's really not very hard, honestly. Maybe hard to get started on it, but once you get on, it's really easy to get off. So it's really easy
once you're on, you want off. You're like, where's the end? I've watched the videos. I've watched videos. I'm like, I don't know. But maybe when you're in the motion and after 2 days working with Tony, or the folks like yourself that work with Tony or did, you get so pumped that you've gotten to this place, like that persuasion in a way, as we talk, that you're just like, let's do it now. With everything we do. I think about the first time I did a zip line. I was like, I'm not doing it. And then I'm like, let's do it. It just, you get so pumped and the adrenaline goes and you're suddenly like, well, I don't want to be the only guy on the other side of this fire. That's the other thing too. You don't want to be alone on the journey. Right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because other people have done firewalks that are very different from Tony's style. They're more like a meditative experience. And I've been to those as well and participated in those where it's really kind of like you quiet yourself and almost like get into a havening state, where you're just totally centered and mellow and you just stroll across the coals. It's really very different. And instead of a lane where you walk from here to there, it's a circle. And so people just, fire pit, basically. People keep walking back and forth, strolling across. It's pretty
I'd be
remarkable.
havening like crazy if I was doing that. I'd be havening while I was fire walking. I'd be fire havening. Is that something? Do we need to talk to the doctor's Rudins about that?
Yeah. Fire havening. Yes.
God,
trademark.
Please no. The big old NO on that one. All right. So I want to play a little game with you. You're a fun guy.
Goodness.
Yay. We're going to do a little word. Since you love words, we're going to do word association game. I'm going to throw out a word at you. Things that we've been talking about this whole time. I just wrote down some words, and without even thinking about it, just come back with the first word that comes to Doug's mind.
I didn't know this was happening today. Hold on.
Do you need a 5? Do you need a 5-er?
No. Let's go ahead. Let's go.
Let's do it. Let's go. Like the fire walk. Come on. All right. Here we go.
All right.
Persuasion.
What about it?
You're not playing correctly. I'm keeping all this stuff in. I do less edits as I go along. Let's try that again, shall we, Douglas? I'm going to add another word in there because you're a pain in the butt. All right. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Persuasion.
Sleight of mouth.
Music.
Piano.
Brooklyn.
Home.
Firewalk. 2 words, whatever.
Fun.
Language.
Patterns.
Storytelling.
Beauty.
Words.
Truth.
Oh yeah, we're stopping right there. I like that. We're ending on that. I like that. Truth behind words. Want to elaborate on what did that word come to mind?
Well, because when I first thought, it wasn't the first thing that came to mind. The first thing that came to mind was poetry.
Yeah.
And I thought of some of my favorite poems and poets. And so truth seemed to exemplify that.
I like that. So in closing, do you have anything you'd like to share with listeners of Holistically Speaking?
I don't know what would be the most appropriate thing to say. I would just like to say that I am very honored to be here with you and speaking to your listeners, because gosh, you're an amazing woman, an amazing person, and I'm really pleased to know you and to be able to share this space with you is an honor and a privilege. So thank you for having me.
The feeling is mutual, and thank you for being part of the journey with me as well, and making me a better, giving me the tools rather than making me, giving me the tools and supporting me and guiding me to become a better practitioner and person. Everybody walks into our life for a reason, and I learn from every person that shares the space. And I say it all the time on this podcast. Every guest to me is like a masterclass. I learn so much from my guests. It's why I'm so selective with who I want on here, because I want it to be a touch, move, and inspire kind of journey for my listeners and for myself. So thank you. I would love for you to take a moment and tune in to what Doug has to offer. You can find more about his work by visiting his website, Doug O'Brien Hypnosis. I put the link on the podcast page for you, so definitely check Doug out. And you can also get in touch with me anytime you want and learn more about havening. Just visit hilaryrusso.com/havening. And if you want to know more about that brain candy that I always talk about and would like to work together to learn more about how you can put the power of active emotional well-being back in your own hands and hug it out, just set up a complimentary discovery call with me and we'll go from there. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and if you did, consider sharing it with just one person. Even better, leave a rating and a review and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Your words matter, but you know that. So leave a comment and let me know how I'm doing. Holistically Speaking is edited by David Seiss with music by Lippo Redding and recorded on Squadcast. And as always, my friend, be kind to your mind and don't forget to laugh.